Welcome to Nui. Today we have with us Jesse Engelbrecht. Hi, Jesse.
Hey, Julie, how's it going? Nice to see you. You well?
Oh, I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, good, good. Just had a nice walk in the sunshine in the UK. Can you believe it? The sun appeared about 10 minutes ago. So I thought, good opportunity, get outside, freshen up a little bit before we have this really good chat.
Well, that's nice because look at our background. We usually have sun all the time.
I know, yeah, it's somehow the UK is
We switch.
beating kind of, yeah, exactly. Can you believe it?
Sounds good. Well, Jesse, you have such a fascinating life. Former pro squash player. You have your master's in sports and health psychology and so much more. But I love to just know how this all got started for you. I mean, we've already talked a couple of times because of our dear friend Paul Asiante, who introduced us. So hello, Paul. We love you. But yeah, I'd love our audience to know a bit more about just where you grew up and how this
Sure.
journey got started for you.
Yeah, I'll try and make it as concise as possible, but I might just start almost at the end and slightly work back. The reason I got into looking really in detail at sports psychology and trying to figure it out was because I thought as a professional squash player, I let myself down massively. I failed many, many times over, not from the physical side, not from the technical side, but from the mind. I was inconsistent. I wasn't able to handle the ego, the testosterone, the fear of failure, winning at all costs. And yeah, so as soon as I retired, I had that burning question to go, right, I need to try figure out what kind of went wrong in my career a little bit to actually help others to go, okay, well, if I had a certain toolkit or a certain way of thinking, then I might have been able to be a bit more consistent, a bit more content. So yeah, that's how I kind of am where I'm at right now. And then there's a whole backstory behind that. But yeah, very simple background. Grew up in Zimbabwe on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Running around with shoes, well, no shoes all day. Only really got my first pair of shoes when I went to school at about 6, 7 years old. So it was a very basic upbringing, but beautiful. Sunshine, cows, farm, beautiful, beautiful stuff. Got into sports really early at school. Find I was pretty okay at most sports. I think growing up in Africa, we're very lucky. We just get exposed to sport really early on. School day finishes at 1 o'clock every day, and you always play two sports in the afternoon. So it would be like hockey and athletics on one term, and then it would be like rugby and squash another term.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, it was really cool to just be exposed to that. So fast forward a little bit to my teenage years, started to niche down in squash, found I was kind of okay at that. Started going overseas, playing in some tournaments, played British Junior Open, Scottish Junior Open, Irish Junior Open, started to do pretty well. Got to 18, thought, okay, I'm either going to go the college route or I'm going to go try play pro sports. And I chose the pro sport route because when I got into it, there wasn't many people that could go to college and actually get an education and then play pro sport afterwards, especially in squash. So I decided to go that route. And by the way, now it's very different. You get most people going through college and then playing pro squash. So it's a much healthier way to do it. And then spent about 10 years on the pro tour, just touring around the world, chasing the dream. Got to South Africa #1, played in the Commonwealth Games, played in a few world teams and world opens. Got to eventually 55 in the world, which I thought was okay. Again, I really genuinely thought I could have got higher than that. But yeah, the mind let me down. And fast forward to now, I'm coaching it, talking about it, and trying to educate people as much as possible.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Everything really, because I tell you, like, I love living in Austin. I love living downtown, but there is this part of my soul that when you talk about just like running around on the farm and no shoes, it's it
It's
tapped into
idyllic.
something in me, and it always has. Just being able to kind of be out in nature, and that had to just, I don't know, allowed for a lot of creativity and freedom, which I think is so important to sports when you start playing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, 100%. I think with I suppose, I don't know, say modern world, but especially where I live now and a lot of the athletes I work with, I was actually on a call with someone earlier today, one of these young athletes, really top high level performer. And yeah, she's feeling guilty about taking rest time and actually not training around Christmas. And I'm like, no, you know what you need to do? Get outside, go walk, get into nature. I use the word disengage a lot. So I really try and encourage my athletes to disengage as much as possible. We're always on. We're always on the go. It's incredible. The technology, the social media, all of that's incredible, but it's actually wiring our brain possibly to be continually hit by dopamine, continually fast paced, instant gratification. I think a lot of the world is set up for that right now. So yeah, if we're talking about nature, again, ranging from mindfulness to gratitude to slowing down to noticing your thoughts to being in the moment, a huge part of high performance sports, a part that gets massively neglected, a part that feels like you're wasting time by doing it because you're not getting extra reps and you're not pushing harder, you're not pushing those boundaries. I really push back on the other way. I'm going, no, like this is part and parcel of high performance. If you can be more in tune with, getting outside, actually just looking further away than the end of your arm. Sometimes obviously the screen's at the end of our arm, that actually kind of having your vision looking up. And there's some pretty cool stats about, getting early sunlight in the morning, and especially if you are walking as well. And if you're walking and getting sunlight, what it does for your sleep rhythms and circadian rhythms, some really cool stuff in there. So yeah, if you ask me about getting out into nature, I'm always championing it. I went, this very quick backstory as well, went on this amazing little kind of getaway with my other half. It's called Lundy Island, tiny little island. It's about 1.5 miles long to half a mile wide. You can only get there by boat, about 40 minutes. No, it's actually what I'm saying. It's an hour and a half boat into the middle of the ocean, really remote. And it was amazing. Rocky outcrops, like no internet there. And it was just the best 4 or 5 days, just completely disengaging. And yeah, came back full of energy, ready to go again.
I bet. And I love that you recommend that to your players as well. And for them to know that they can come back and still be a really strong player. That's something that I struggled with talking to my son about, that he was so concerned that if he takes any time off of basketball, that he's going to all of a sudden lose all of his skills. I don't think he thinks he's going to lose all of his skills, but you know what I mean. There is that fear wrapped up in that. And for the first time over the Christmas break, he said, I want to take a break.
Fantastic.
And I said, good idea. And we talked a little bit about visualizing too, though, because like one of the players that I work with, he was injured. And during that injury time, we really focused on visualization and things that you can do, like to create, these plays in your mind when you are able to get back out there on the court and start playing. So we talked a little bit about that, like just because your body is physically resting, it's okay to daydream. And I think that's another thing that the phone doesn't allow us to do, is just daydream into what could be, what are the possibilities and the fun things in life. And you can call it visualization or daydream, maybe it's a little bit of both. But yeah, just being able to tap into the things that you love and create this kind of, virtual reality world in your mind.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the idea of just letting your thoughts take you wherever. I purposely try to get at least 30 minutes, if not 45 minutes to an hour walk per day. But again, no technology, no phone, purposely just go. My agenda might just take me absolutely anywhere. And again, I really encourage it with any athletes. Again, there's so much good data and science about just walking. And actually, a lot of times, high performance athletes kind of think, well, I'm walking, but I should be pushing. I should be getting myself an oxygen deck, really going deeper. But there's so much good evidence for just purely walking. Yes, of course, you got to get your reps, and of course, you got to lift those heavy weights. But if you can actually find time to walk, and ideally walking in nature, the benefits are incredible. I read a book maybe about a year ago called Rest. And actually the main concept was called deliberate rest. We all hear about deliberate practice and being intentional with our practice and our focus. But this book was incredible because it gave all the data and the science around how deliberate high performers are with their rest, ranging from meditations to even self-hypnosis to just less stimulation, like we're just continually being stimulated. And it's incredible on one side of the coin, but then what's the dark side of the coin? I've got a bit of a theory that back in the 1930s 40s, you had doctors smoking on television saying, hey, tobacco is amazing for us, go smoke, it's incredible. I've got a feeling what we're doing right now with social media, it's almost the tobacco for the brain. It's kind of like it's uncontrolled, it's untapped. It's just a constant fire hydrant just being pushed into people. And how we can't see, okay, with smoking, if you obviously look at the lungs, you can see something there. Obviously now with brain scanning, we can maybe see what's happening. But I'm interested in like the next 15, 20, 30 years when all of a sudden, oh, wow, this inverted commas smoking social media thing that everyone thought was okay, it'll be like, wow, actually it needs to be a lot more regulated. Anyway, I went off on a tangent there.
Yeah, but I hear you on that. But what I love that you were talking about is taking that rest. And even as an entrepreneur, I had to do that last spring. I ran out of runway and I didn't know what to do. Like, what's the next step? And the only thing I could think to do is like work harder, sleep less, work every day, work on the weekends. Like, I was literally just kind of losing everything. And what I finally did was I stepped back. I had to get realigned with my values, which is why I started what I was, why I started Nui and everything I'm doing, and take not so much a rest, but to take those days to enjoy time in the nature. And so it can apply in so many different areas, whether you're an athlete, entrepreneur, whatever it is you're doing in life. When you find yourself holding on to things with dear life, like you can't let it go. You have to work harder than ever. You have to work 150%. Working hard is important, but rest is equally as important. So thank you for hitting on that. I'd love to know a little bit more about when you were a professional squash player. You're at the top of your game. What was your mind like during that time? You said your mind kind of got the best of you. What did that look like?
I suppose the simple, most obvious one was I wasn't doing it for myself. It was all about, what do I look like in the eyes of other people? Am I seen as a higher member of the tribe? What is my status like within the squash community, within my friends, within my family? And a little story that really, don't get too emotional about it now, but kind of thinking about it also brings up some memories that must have been in my early 20s. Again, moved over from Zimbabwe to the UK. There was a bunch of my friends from school. They all lived in certain houses in Wimbledon, like South London area, and I used to live quite close by. And again, just they were, again, my best friends, amazing. But I wouldn't go to see them. I wouldn't go to any parties of them if I'd lost some matches. I made excuses because I thought they would see me as way less. I was like, man, like they see me as this professional squash player. At my school and my college, I won Sportsman of the Year. So all of this kind of building up and in my younger years, and being told by coaches and parents with the best intentions in the world, you're so talented, you're brilliant, you're amazing. And that just fed the fixed mindset. If you read some Carol Dweck stuff, fixed versus growth mindset. So I got this image or this perception that, yeah, I need to always look good. I always need to like be performing at my best. And yeah, I would embarrassingly think that I lost the match. I need to stay away from that. And eventually when I did ask them about this years later, they're like, dude, we would love you no matter what. Like, if you never won another squash match in your life, we see you as exactly the same person as if you're a world champion. Like, you don't go any higher or lower in our kind of ranking. And again, I heard this towards the end of my career, and it probably did start a bit of the journey of, wow, let me investigate status, ego, not running my own race, and also like where it actually got fueled from. And yeah, when I unpacked it all, a lot of it was fixed mindset sentiments. Brilliant, talented, you're the best, like whatever you do, you'll achieve the best. Whereas none of the language was around the process, around the, that's pretty much what Carol Dweck says. When you speak about or coach your athletes around the efforts, the strategies, the things that they can control, and fueling that type of mindset, you're not scared of failure. Failure is just part of the whole process of things. And yeah, I felt very afraid to fail. I felt failure was a massive attack on me as a person, how the world saw me. And again, it's all BS if we really look at it. If we kind of go back, like there's a great article called The Spotlight Effect, where we know we're not the center of our universe, but under certain situations and uncertain, even pressure, we think we are the center of our universe. We think there's a spotlight on us, but actually when they've done studies and tests, like I think they did one with a college student wearing like a really naff shirt of, some whatever, like old musician. And when they asked the other college students around, like what was on that person's shirt, no one even knew. And this person was purposely embarrassing themselves in front of them. So it's a really interesting thing around this idea where we think we're the center of everything. And yeah, the more I got to know that later on when I retired and all the tools I use within SportMind, that's what I'm trying to leverage a little bit more. Just give people the understanding that going, hey, listen, your status is not defined by the results, the ones and zeros on a screen, because that's all it is really. It's just ones and zeros on a screen when we really break it down to it.
Yeah, well, and it makes sense. I mean, when we're born, most people are the center, babies are the center of attention. And you have to nurture and foster and grow these children, and so they're it. Your eyes are on them, you're doing all these things, and you are the center of attention, right? And
Yeah.
so when do you learn, and when do kids start to learn that you're not? And there's no real talk around that, I don't believe, It's just kind of like you grow up and you realize you're not alone in the world and you're not the center of attention. But I think it's easy for people to go back and really feel like that spotlight is on them at some certain times, which is why we're probably, people have a fear of speaking and other things like that. You still kind of feel like you're the center of attention, you're on the spotlight.
Yeah, what I think it slightly comes down to, which I find fascinating, part of our ancient brain, that's why we're here today, because it's all about survival. End of the day, it's all about, we need to survive, we need to procreate and kind of, move our generations forward. And if we were seen as an invaluable member of that so-called tribe back in the ancient day, our fight, flight, or freeze mode would kick in our brain. We go, oh, okay, like we're going to be outside the cave tonight. We're not going to be able to survive the night. So I've got to find a way to get myself higher in the pecking order to have value within things. And obviously, fast forward to modern day sport, it'd be a very extreme situation if you lose a match or don't perform well, that you're going to lose the roof over your head, or all of a sudden you're going to be on the street. That's probably like never really ever going to happen. And it's about trying to, I suppose, rewire those thought patterns. It's ingrained. It's part of our hardware. It's in there. But if we can actually have a conversation about it, recognize that it's sitting around there and going, okay, what's my reframing tool? What's the thing that I'm noticing that's maybe not a rational thought? And once that irrational thought comes in, how do we nudge it slowly back onto the rational mindset, going, okay, what's my next action? What's the next thing that I can control in the next moment? And yeah, it's actually, bit by bit, spending so much time, not fighting, that's the wrong word, but just pushing back against that chimp mind, that ancient brain that we have pretty much built into us.
So when you were in that certain mindset, where you feel like it was a more fixed mindset, and thinking about all the things that you coach on and you have people come to you on, do you feel like there is a part of them that needs to kind of go through this experience, that's the part of the journey of learning where, their ego might be a little bit inflated, they think they know it all because, they're 20 years old, and a lot of us do think we know it all at 20. I mean, I remember feeling that. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, yep.
So do you think this is a part of the journey of kids learning these things, or do you think that there is a way that we can really help just transform completely of that process and not have them, and have them work within the world at a different light and angle?
Yeah, I wrote a blog called Knowledge versus Wisdom. Knowledge is the cerebral. I understand I need to do this. I understand the tools. I understand failure. I understand success. Wisdom is the lived experience of that knowledge. So in simple terms, Julie, you need to be put on your ass a few times. You need to be knocked down a few pegs, because that's the only way wisdom grows. You could have the best knowledge. You could have read every book. You could have the best coaching from every single person you can imagine. But until you walk that path, until you have tried to apply the knowledge, you don't have the wisdom. So I think it's quite an important differentiator, knowledge versus wisdom. And yeah, quick story example of one of the players I work with. He had his greatest ever success in kind of November time, won a major tournament, really good, got to his highest world ranking. And next tournament, 2 days later, he lost in the first round to someone ranked way, way below him. And he didn't, he's a very grounded, very humble person. But that one little part of him was like, I've arrived. I'm at the big table now. And when he had to play someone lower than him, and I really saw myself in parts of what happened to him, was exactly that, going, oh, I've won this tournament in a certain way. I'm getting top 14 in the world now. And all of a sudden, if someone's now really competing and taking me down into the gutter, and I'm having to kind of fight hard to win this match, that's not part of the script, because I've elevated myself up to this kind of level. And it's one of the biggest pitfalls. So yes, I think he got a lot of wisdom within the space of 48 hours, winning something and then being put on his butt pretty quickly the next thing. And again, great kid. He came back. We talked about, the growth mindset, really got into it. And he was like, yeah, you know what? This is a great opportunity. I'm really almost glad I went through that experience, glad that I had the highest of the high. And then he said he almost felt the lowest of the low, because he said, well, the loss that he had in that first round, he was now thinking, well, it invalidates that whole tournament. I shouldn't have won that tournament. I shouldn't even be the champion of that previous tournament because I lost first one. I was like, whoa, pump the brakes here. That's not what, that's a whole separate. Yes, you got to celebrate those wins and the success, but knowing that, hey, listen, if your game is not on, if your opponent has got their best game ever, you should have no ego. The ego is left at the door. Your job, if I'm just using a squash context, is to hit that rubber ball around that rectangular room better than the other person. Ego, status, previous results, form, don't come into it. What comes into it? Who can hit that rubber ball around that room for better, longer and better than the other person? That's ultimately what squash is, if you really break it down to its bare bones.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And because ultimately we can't fix people, we can guide them and we can give them the tools. Like with Sports Mind, you're giving people the tools and the resources and everything that they need to be able to handle stressful situations. But I think, and there was, I don't know if you've heard of that song by Coldplay, I Will Fix You. I love that song. I still love that song. But I remember when I was oh my gosh, so emotional. I remember when I was pregnant, that's on my son's playlist, and I just thought, I'm gonna fix you, I'm gonna try and fix you. And as I've lived life, I realized you can't fix people, and they need to go through certain things. They need to get on their ass sometimes. They need to fall on their ass in order to make that change, in order to evolve, in order to gain wisdom. And as a parent, as a coach, as a friend, sometimes it's so hard to kind of step back and know I can see from afar what's happening here, and I kind of have to let it happen. And you can guide, you can do your things, but ultimately it's other people's lives, right?
That's why I think the growth mindset is pretty much one of the first lessons that I go into when anyone comes into my ecosystem, because it's preparing them for failure. It's going, yeah, listen, you are going to fail, but it's how you fail. Are you failing forwards? Are you failing upwards? All of these cool things to think about going, yeah, because it's the mindset of be annoyed, be angry, be frustrated, but like 12 hours, 24 hours, you come out of that and like Nelson Mandela said it best, you never lose, or I never lose, I win or learn. I think that's such a powerful thing. I'm winning or learning. But actually, if you're honest, I think you're always winning and learning in whatever situation, if you really look at it from the proper lens of growth mindset. And I think as soon as, especially the teens I work with, I tend to get a lot of teens that have been, again, high performers, highly successful, winning a lot of things all the time, but a lot of pressure from the parents, a lot of expectations about, getting to those Ivy League colleges or getting these scholarships. And that's incredible. It's incredible they can access this. But no one's ever had a conversation with them about, okay, but like when you do lose, what lens are you looking at through? Like when you are put down for days and weeks and months at a time, how are you still moving forwards? Even if you, inverted commas, failing by the scoreboard, you are still growing yourself as a human being. I tell a lot the story of the Chinese bamboo tree. I might have said it when we had a chat, but it's a very simple analogy where you plant this real special seed of this Chinese bamboo tree, and you got to water the soil, you got to fertilize, you got to look after it. You see nothing for a couple of weeks, you see nothing for a couple of months. And this is a true story, by the way. You see nothing for 5 years. The first shoot only shows after 5 years, but that shoot grows 80 feet in 5 weeks. It literally grows in front of your eyes. But the reason that's a powerful story, just because nothing's happening on the surface, if you're looking after your soil, if you're cultivating it, the roots are growing deep and wide. There's growth happening under the surface. And it's understanding if you're doing the right processes, if you're trusting in those processes, if it's diligent and purposeful and effortful, even if the surface level is not looking great, there's something in there, something deep inside at your root.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So whenever you walk me through kind of the end of your career as a professional squash player, and what that transition looked like for you. Was there a loss of identity, or, I know that transition can be really hard for people. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about that time.
Probably not so much, because I think I'd probably clocked out about 18 months, like I'd mentally kind of gone, I think so. But I went through the motions for about a year to 18 months of still playing pro, not really for myself, just playing. But I was already starting to coach at the time, just getting on court, coaching. So my first part of my journey was all coaching. It wasn't anything to do with the mental side. But the more I got into the coaching, so the transition for me was relatively easy. In all honesty, I'll kind of back up a bit. There was quite a hard, abrupt stop at one point. I did like stop playing pro. I was done. I was like, I'm just doing anything besides this, right? And but I actually missed it. I actually missed the kind of camaraderie, the competitiveness. So I got back into it a little bit, and it was quite an enjoyable last 18 months in a different type of way. But it was all about like a bit of a slow transition out. So then, yes, fast forward to just, actual coaching. I'm on court, I'm coaching, I'm doing okay, developing some juniors, developing some adults. A few pros used to come and see me. And yeah, I've started to find my niche within just coaching. And yeah, again, even now, I've got to check in with the identity and even what I'm doing with Sportmart. I'm going, am I just validating myself through the medium of the good things that I'm doing now? It's a constant checking in process. And COVID was really interesting. So obviously COVID hit, couldn't coach, couldn't physically do anything. It all started with, the home workouts and tapping little balls on the wall or doing some movement things in your garden. And then one of my young players reached out to me and said, you know what? I'm done with this. Like, what else can I do? And he struggled with the mental side. So I'd gone through my master's degree in sports psychology, kind of wrote up a few things, and I thought that was interesting. So I just started sending him some audio things on WhatsApp saying, right, here's a 6-7 minute visualization, like you referred to earlier. This is, you're playing the rally up and down the backhand wall. You're moving to the back. You're going for that volley drop. And he seemed to like it. So it then moved into, okay, well, I'll put this on SoundCloud. So made it more accessible. That picked up a bit of traction. It's like, okay, there seems like there's something here. Then transitioned into an app. I was like, right, I'm going to put this all into an app. Then the app started to do well. And then it's like, right, it created a whole syllabus. And then it just built and built. And, like the journey you're on also, it's just a continual building process right now. So that's, again, a bit of a fast track of how it all went. Still physically on court, still coaching a lot of squash, but feeling it's almost like, transition from pro to a coach, and almost feels like I'm transitioning from a coach to a psychologist now, but with a bit of a hybrid of both. So yeah, that's kind of like the kind of timelines roughly of that.
Yeah. Well, do you hear of other players that are transitioning out of the sport that do go through harder times?
Yeah. I've interviewed a couple on my podcast talking about this, and actually one of the pros I did coach, a lovely lady called Alison Waters, she got to number 3 in the world. She did her masters on this exact subject, and yes, the ones I've come across, and this is probably a route I want to go down more. I don't know enough about the subject. The ones I've come across have all found a purpose in something else pretty strong. They've all kind of gone, whether it's coaching, mentoring, some have just gone straight into finance or property management, but they've actually used the sport mindset of purpose, focus, determination, and that's been really positive. But saying that, on the other side, I interviewed a cricketer in the UK, really high level cricketer, and again, he very much, we're talking, kind of getting into the suicidal territory, and like very like I've lost my identity, I've lost the change room thing. I think for squash is slightly different because it's such an individual sport. We as squash pros, we just have to do a lot by ourselves. So this whole kind of team spirit is so much less prevalent than cricket, rugby, American football, baseball, maybe. So yeah, I've only really seen the surface level of this. A couple of TED Talks, read some articles on this, looked at a couple of research papers. It sounds like something you're looking at. Are you at the moment? Where are you at with your journey of?
Yeah, so just thinking that's more around college athletes. How many college athletes go on to actually be professional athletes, and what does that look like for them? And just trying to understand a little bit more, because sometimes transition in life can be hard for people if they don't have that purpose. Exactly what you're talking about, I think, is so important. For people that even when they're injured, maybe during that injury time, what else are they outside of being a squash player? What else? What else is a part of your identity? And so I think it's important for everyone in general, who are you? What are some things outside of exactly what you do all the time that you can also find joy in?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I sent you something recently. Obviously, one of the players I work with, she's just ruptured her Achilles for the second time, and she's out for a while. And again, a great little story. I think that she was playing in the semi-final of the Hong Kong Open. She beat the world number 1 3-0 in the semi-finals, like probably the best result she's had in years. And then 12 hours later in the final, 5-all in the first game, like 6 minutes into the final, collapsed on the floor and Achilles is gone. And what was really interesting about her, and we've done quite a bit of work, Amanda Sobey, that's anyone is interested. she was obviously distraught, like majorly distraught, upset, but she only stayed in that victim mentality, like, why me? Oh, will this has happened again? I'm 30 years old. Squash has just got into the Olympics. So we're kind of already thinking why she could be an Olympian. But she only stayed in that emotion for about 24 hours. Very quickly, she flipped. She's like, right, what's the next thing I can control? The next thing was, I need to get back on a flight back home. I need to kind of stop my rent in Florida because I'm going to move back up to kind of Seacliff. I need to book my surgery. And so straight away, she flipped into the purpose, like, right, my purpose is, and we're doing this masterclass series now. She's got a documentary being made about her on the PSA. And so she's automatically very quickly found that purpose. Again, it's not going to be massively groundbreaking, moving the needle like crazy, but it's something. She's like, right, I can, and she wants to tell her story every 8 weeks or so, going, hey, listen, check in, live Q&A stuff. And straight away, she's finding a purpose within that. Yes, there's now rehab. There's all of these other things. But I think that's a great story, an example of anyone transitioning, going, hey, like, if you're forced to transition, yeah, be annoyed, be a bit pissed off. It's going to be part of life. You can't automatically feel like a someone meditating on a mountaintop. It's not going to feel like that automatically, but very quickly allow that emotion to come up, allow yourself to live it. And then it's like, okay, like, what's next? There's a very nice acronym, WIN, win, so WIN, but what's important next? I quite like that. It's kind of like, it's a very simple acronym, like win, obviously win sport, but actually, I think that's a good question people can hold close to themselves, going, okay, if I'm getting overwhelmed by the big thing, or I'm getting so granular and detailed and kind of overly analytical, it's like, okay, what's important next? I think it's quite a good little reminder to use.
I do like that so much. And I love what you talked about of what can I can I control? I think because, as humans, we want to try to control everything, right? We often find out we don't control a lot of things, but we can. There are things that we can control. And I really think with this next generation too, when they talk so much about how this next generation is in crisis because of depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation, so much that's going on, and there's this massive concern, and rightfully so, but how can we teach them to be empowered? And I think one of the ways that we are empowered is when we know what we can control, and when we give people the tools like what you're providing on Sports Mind is that allows them to say, oh wait, I can control this emotion. Like, yes, give myself this time, but here's all these different things. Breath work, I know that's one that you're really involved in. There are ways that you can actually control that stressful situation in that moment, and give them those tools to feel like they have control. So then they feel empowered, and then they feel confident.
100%. And again, this might not be for everyone, but I read a lot of Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus. The cornerstone of Stoicism is we don't control what happens, we control how we respond to what happens. And you can't get a better philosophy for life. It's a very proactive philosophy. It's, again, nothing to do with religion. It's just these really old school thinkers that were very stoic in their approach. And stoic is not like grim and bored and kind of like just relentless. Stoicism is very active, and it's a very dynamically accepting philosophy. You accept the thing straight away. You accept what's within your control. You accept what's not within your control. And guess what? You start to lean into the controllables. And even just that conversation with yourself, I think sometimes that's the first tool. It's that noticing, that awareness, going, I notice that all my mental energy is being expended on the thing I've got no control over. And actually, if I go really detailed here, Julie, I only think there's a very few small things we control. Our attitude, our body language, and our breath work. I tend to go with those three quite a lot. It's a very small bucket. What's in the non-controllable bucket? Opponents, whatever, finance, society, social media. So much is not within our control. And if we're getting either annoyed or getting a lot of joy or whatever emotion the uncontrollables are giving us, I think it's very important to notice and tag that and go, so I'm getting a lot of my emotions, again, whether it's a positive or negative emotion, it's emotions, and it's kind of flipping it, going, okay, I can only really control a few small things, attitude, body language, if we're talking like in the moment of sport here, breath work, but I think those things, and self-talk is actually the fourth one. I talk a lot about self-talk, how we talk to ourselves, because yeah, we can't control the first emotion, but we can choose not to be hit by the second one. I talk about the two arrows, and I won't go too deep down that rabbit hole just yet.
Yeah, I've been trying to monitor the way I talk to myself for quite some time, because I was so critical of myself at one point, which is when I was extremely depressed, had a ton of anxiety, my first panic attacks. And, I think of that voice, that the way I talked to myself back then, and it was not kind.
Because on that as well, just a little side, just basic neuroscience. Yeah, we are what we repeatedly do. If you're repeating a similar thought pattern, you're sending off those neural impulses, that synapse gets stronger, it gets wrapped in that myelin sheath. All of a sudden, it's like a super highway for that thought. The thoughts just want to go down there. I talk about the super highway and the old kind of dusty off ramp. The old dusty off ramp might be the kind of good habit, but your cars are zipping down that highway of the negative thought or the destructive emotion. But we can actually send a few cars down that dusty road. We can divert just one or two. We can just change our thought. It's not going to happen immediately. And all of a sudden, that dusty road, all of a sudden, the dust gets a little bit more cleared. It gets a bit more developed. And there's a few more cars start going down there. And it's just a little analogy I use for some basic neuroscience. If you're entrenched in a thought pattern, a way of thinking, like continually responding in that way, that's okay. It is what it is right now. That's your super highway. Doesn't mean it has to stay there forever. You can redirect one or two little cars down that other highway and start to grow that good habit one.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, the one thing I started to notice as I was tracking all this is that a lot of my thoughts had to do with judgment of myself and comparison, comparing myself to others because I wasn't in this, like more joyful state. But the judgment was what would become so harsh. And I think it's so fulfilling to me now that even if I do have those, days where, I'm going down the road that's not the one I want to be going down, is to say, I forgive myself for having that judgment, because the more I can understand, not judging myself makes it a lot easier not to judge others.
It is. Yeah. That's powerful. You said something that I maybe slightly, even probably in the last week, changed my thoughts a little bit on this. Very famous, comparison is the thief of joy. I think a lot of people say that. I'm slightly challenging that in kind of a healthy way. I don't think comparison is necessarily the worst emotion, but envy. If you think envy, I think envy is the thief of joy. Because if you're comparing, I'd like to think that sometimes if you can see comparing the right mindset of, okay, because that person's there, that means I can also do it. I think if you can look at comparison as almost like a motivator going, right, I noticed they're doing this, but if comparison turns to envy, that's where I think it steals it. So I've only in the last week just slightly tweaked how I think about that, because I always used to say comparison is the thief of joy. I still subscribe to that, but I think comparison as a tool to move ourselves forward in a motivational way, I think could be quite healthy. But when it turns to envy, I think that's where the little kind of nuance is different.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, I think that's really a way to look at it where, once again, if you're comparing yourself to the way somebody moves on the court and you envy that person and you like those moves and you want to start embodying that, that's a healthy comparison.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that blanket statement of comparison is the thief of joy. Yeah, I'm going to be changing my language when I speak to people on this now. And hopefully anyone that's listening, first kind of glimpse at some of the new stuff that's happening up in there.
Very, very good. Okay, so tell me a little bit, Jesse, about in a day, what are you mentioned your top 3 earlier, so I'd love for you to go over those again. But then just also, what are the top 5 things or so that you recommend that people put in their toolbox that they can easily get through and get in that growth mindset that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a one standout one that stands above everything. Again, a very personal thing that I went through. I picked it up probably 3 to 6 months before I went through a divorce and a horrible separation, all that stuff, was journaling. Journaling for me was one of the most powerful things. Self-reflection, slowing down, getting thoughts down on paper. Started really basic. It started with literally one line of gratitude and just one thought. It's now developed into, again, don't want to freak anyone out because it's taken years, but I've got two journals. I've actually got like a Stoic journal where I read a passage and go deep down the Stoic route. And then I've got a second journal, which starts with gratitude. It's then just general open thoughts. And then I always finish with something to avoid. So I think for me, and again, it's a morning and evening thing because you want to almost get to the evening, read what you've written in the morning and go, oh, I wrote these things and I wanted my day to be like this. I was nowhere near that, not because of someone else's fault, maybe because of mine. And then you're growing your reflection muscle. I think John Dewey said it best. He said, we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on that experience. So I can't emphasize enough, like journaling, even if it's like one lines. Again, anyone listening, I think it's one of the most powerful things. It slows you down. It kind of forces you to be with your thoughts a bit. Again, pen and paper, some good science based on like, getting things down and putting things on paper, even just kind of like the scribing it in, and there's something to do with the neurons and how it sense the brain. Again, I could nerd you out about this for a bit.
Yeah.
So that would be my first thing. And then other habits that again, I'm so much about habits and more about systems than habits, like getting like a system in place that actually cultivates habits. I talk a lot less about goals and goal setting now, even though goal setting is part of the system. But I've got a system called OTP, which stands for outcome through process. So the outcome through process system is going, okay, let's just look at your day. Let's even just start time stamping it the night before with some of the basic stuff. Okay, where can I fit in a healthy habit? We're talking some basic stuff like, hey, jump onto the app and do a 5-minute breathwork session, or there's an athlete Zen session, which is a bit more of a meditation. I think those things can come. I'm going to go back half a step here. So for me, journaling is number one.
Okay.
And then the second thing, which I think is super, super important, it's linked to this OTP system, is setting your intentions, being intentional, especially about your next day, going, okay, so tomorrow, again, start basic, doesn't need to be big, but I've got, I don't know, I've got a couple of training sessions. Right. When I turn up to that training session, it's at 10 a.m. I'm going to turn up at 9:45. I'm going to flick my phone into airplane mode, and I'm going to either stretch my body or I'm going to do some breath work. Something where it's just going, let's just get like a small little drop in the bucket. I talk about adding little drops to the bucket. So if you added like a healthy habit like that, we're talking 15 minutes. Don't try revolutionize your whole day. But I think if athletes can start to become intentional and purposeful, all driven to like why, understand your why, like why are you doing this? Why are you playing the sport? Is it for you? Is it for someone else? Is it to be famous? Is it just for learning skills? I think that's a whole big conversation separate. But intentionality and purpose, I think, is really key. And just spending maybe 3 minutes the night before, writing something down that you're going to do the next day, ideally following through with it. But if you don't judge yourself. Like you said, I think don't be too hard and just go, okay, I got it wrong today. Guess what I'm going to do the next night? I'm going to set that intention again, whether I need to change it or do the same one. And I go again and I go again. Okay, all of a sudden in a week, you might have done that 3 times. Great. Right. Next goal. Can I get a 5-day streak? Let's see if I can do this for 5 days. So for me, that's probably a really big, if I just say journaling is a general tool, but actually I think this intentionality is a very big thing. And yes, from there, you can start to add in the little bits of breath work, the little bits of meditation, or build in time to cultivate some relationships outside of sport, whatever that may be. So yeah, there's probably so much I could go. And again, like I said, this whole system takes probably, a bit of while to explain, but that's the essence of it is setting those intentions the night before. So then when you wake up, you don't have to make decisions on this. Your goal is to master the art of showing up and try and deliver on it.
Right. Yes. And then too, I like the small chunks, do what you can do. And, walking you talked about earlier is something else that you do. If you can, in the beginning of the day, if you can only get in 10 minutes of walking with your phone down, that's better than nothing.
Well, like I always say, 2 minutes is infinitely better than no minutes. No minutes you don't rack up any score. Like even like a few seconds above that is infinitely better. So yes, again, with habits, it's all about starting small, sustainable habits. Everyone gets excited. Obviously, we're getting close to New Year. Everyone's going to be like a flurry of activity. Is it something like 70% of gym memberships or not used by like mid-February or something like that? There's some crazy stat that it's just the drop off is crazy because everyone has that. And again, I've never set a New Year's intention or New Year's because I'm like, well, I can set this if I wake up on Christmas Day and I want to set an intention, okay, I'm going to do it then.
Right.
Why wait to kind of a random date in the year to start that off? It's like because actually I want to start off small. I want to start off sustainable. I might use the 1st of January as an example, but it's going, okay, but I would have, should have, could have done this at any other time. So yes, habits are all about this, get the small wins, start cultivating the small wins, get that dopamine released. Then it becomes a habit by definition where you don't have to think about it. And then it's like, okay, can I leverage another one? And can I leverage? And you're basically stacking habits on top of each other. That's what I see the top athletes out there do so well, is they don't get this flurry of excitement to kind of revolutionize their life. They go, right, what's the kind of the smallest thing for the next 21 odd days that I'm going to really get into? And that's why they're able to perform at that highest level under pressure, because it's not like they've gone from their practice environment like a big leap into their performance environment. It's almost part and parcel. It's like, oh, I'm just moving naturally from my purposeful, intentional practices into a final of the World Open. Yes, there's going to be slightly more pressure and nerves. Of course, you can't ignore that. But what they've done in the build up to it, they're not like superhuman switch where they turn on and kind of peak in the final. It's that accumulation of everything.
That's right. That's right. Jesse, everything that you've said today, I feel like I could keep talking for hours.
Likewise, because I know our podcast, we had that same feeling afterwards as well. So
I know. And I love what you're doing. It aligns so much with what we're trying to do too. And I don't think that there can ever be enough.
Yeah. And like just on that, I think what I find as a coach quite interesting, I could say a very similar message to what you're saying, but if it comes from obviously just a different voice or a different angle, it might resonate with someone. So yes, I don't think anyone should ever have like ownership of this or go like, this is the only way you work on your mental strength, or you work on your resilience, or you work on your being present in the moment. But yes, I think, anyone that's liking this, stuff you're doing is incredible. If anyone wants to check out SportMind, sportmind.io is where you can find most of the stuff, or sportmind_io on Instagram. But yeah, you can just land on that page. There's a whole bunch of interesting stuff going on there. So yeah, no, I do really appreciate it.
And we'll have all the information below too. So thank you for saying that. Because I'm on your app and I can't wait to hear the series that you have with your player that's injured. I think that that's so important. And for anyone in life, whether you're an athlete, whether you've gotten a divorce, I know we've talked about that before. These are transitions that you have to kind of learn to navigate, and to have somebody out there saying like, you're not alone, and I'm doing it in this way, and this is how I'm, what I'm going through right now, I just think it's spectacular. So I can't wait to hear more about that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, keep up the great work yourself, and look forward to seeing what happens with you and your business in the next 6 to 12 months plus.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you again. I want to thank Jesse Engelbrecht again for joining us here at Nui. You can check out his story at Nui_community on our YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, and share this with your friends so we can get this message out there around mental performance and everything that he has going on. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.